Oh, okay.
They put it on YouTube right after he does it.
All right.
I've never watched his show, but I have seen clips from it on YouTube.
He's certainly Bill Maher's.
We are live on YouTube. Thank you everyone for joining us. We are glad to be back studying the Torah. I believe we're in 2 Kings chapter 11. Is everybody, that's where we are? Okay, we had just left off with Yehu, who in his zeal and appointment by God upended the terrible ancestry of both kingdoms, which had rested in the loins of Jezebel, and has now removed both the king of Judah of Israel, who he has now replaced, and the king of Judah from their thrones. And we start in chapter 11, but first we'll start with the blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. If you say amen, you get full credit. All right. We are here. I'm trying to just pull up my commentary. Okay. And let me share for the people who are online so that we get it on the screen. Okay. So when Atalia, the mother of Ahaziah, learned that her son was dead, she promptly killed off all who were of royal stock. Right? Why did she do this? So she could be queen.
Yeah.
If there were no other Davidic descendants around, then she'd be the only one, and she would rule, theoretically. But Yehosheva, daughter of King Yoram, sister of Ahaziah, secretly took Ahaziah's son Joash away from among the princes who were being slain and put him and his nurse in a bedroom. And they kept him hidden from Atalia so that he was not put to death. Right? So Atalia was killing all these kids. It was like Revenge of the Sith, the Star Wars movie, where they kill a bunch of kids. Anyway, she was killing a bunch of kids, and I mean, what does this make you think of? I know what it immediately made me think of. We had to rescue a kid and his nurse from all these kids getting killed.
Yeah.
Where else in the Jewish story do we see that?
Story.
In the Jewish story, I'm talking about. Unfortunately,
as you point out, much of the New Testament is derivative from the.
Indeed, and yes, you're right in the sense. I acknowledge that. Yes, in the Jesus story, he is being pursued by the king, right? By King Herod, because of potentially being overthrown. And of course, that story looks like this story, which also looks like what other king is worried about being overthrown? Pharaoh. Moses. The Jews of the Exodus story. They're killing all the kids and they sneak the kid off into a basket. And then they get his sister or mother to be nursemaid to the kid. Yeah, it was an easy one, I admit. I know, right? No. Jewish Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu was saved in the same way. So it's nice to see when these kind of things, they bring these themes back in so that we can appreciate them.
Distressingly common among kingships and in
that time it was very common. If you wanted to make sure your line was the one that made it, and your dad had 8 kids, you might kill the rest of them when you get power or when you're trying to get power, so that nobody threatens your line in the future. Then you have a bunch of kids, and the next generation does the same thing. It's not a model for stability. I think we can all agree.
And I think it was Churchill said democracy is the worst system except for all the others.
Yes, right. It was Churchill who said that. And right, exactly, because at least, right, there's the stability in government is the key to success and prosperity, is one of the keys. I would also argue liberalism, the sense of freedoms, are the other key.
Yeah.
But nobody's participating in our democracy. We only get 60% of the people voting.
Well, I agree that more people should. I used to say I agree that more people should vote. Now I'm kind of like, some people are very dumb and some people are very anti-Semitic. And to be fair, I'd rather they not vote. If everyone in Kentucky 4 or whatever wants to stay home, if you were going to vote for Massey, that would be fine.
Well,
if you on Tuesday, if you're voting for Galrine, please show up to the
And
polls.
that,
Yay! Okay.
that is the problem with democracy, is lack of education and the fact that you can.
Yes,
sway
just like
masses.
Reform Judaism, it's a good idea in theory, but unfortunately, it requires a great deal of education and commitment to be a good idea in practice. Because what happens in both democracy and Reform Judaism, when people are not sufficiently educated, is that they just water everything down and do it badly and don't put any thought into it because they weren't trained how to think about it. And so all of these things contribute to the weakening of a culture and such. And that's true about our democratic culture in this country, and it's true about Reform
So
Judaism.
not put words in your mouth and say it.
I'll always spit them back out if I don't like them. Yeah.
Orthodox Judaism would be more authoritarian.
It's more hierarchical. It's more, I wouldn't say it's authoritarian. I would say that I would say that it relies on a much stronger authority structure, in that if you believe there are binding rules and that there are arbiters of binding rules, in this case the rabbis, you consult with them and then listen to them. By the way, again, it's the same. It's like calling medicine a dictatorship because doctors have all the knowledge. It's like, no. Rabbis are a meritocracy. You can choose to become one and learn enough to become one if you want. You can also choose to be ignorant and not know anything and just go to a rabbi to ask questions in Orthodox Judaism. Now, you probably want to go to an expert if you have a very difficult question. If you have a blister, I have a blister on my finger. I did not go see a doctor. I put a Band-Aid over it when it was raw. Now it's scabbed over. I'm leaving it open. It's healing. It'll be fine. Ezrat Hashem. I didn't need to go to a doctor for that. It's not secret medical or difficult medical knowledge. It's not a tumor. Sorry, I love the Arnold Schwarzenegger line from that movie. It's not a tumor. Anyway, it's not a tumor. If it was, I would go to a doctor because this would be not something I could deal with on my own. Same thing in Orthodox Judaism. If you've got a thing where you're like, oh, should I wash the plates separate from? Yes, you should do that already. That's an easy halakhic answer. You don't need a rabbi, your Rav, to tell you what you should do in that case. But if you're like, I just had a difficult pregnancy, we had the kid and it was healthy, Baruch Hashem, should I go on birth control, which is normally forbidden to Orthodox women, to prevent getting pregnant again and maybe having a health issue? That's not a question that a random Jew can answer on their own generally. They're going to want someone who's an expert in Jewish text and tradition and law to give them it. Same thing, if you get into a car accident on the fender bender, you exchange your insurance information, you wait for the cops to get there, they write up a report, you send it to your insurance, that's the end, right? You don't need a lawyer for that necessarily. But if you get charged with drug possession, God forbid, you better have a lawyer. That's not something I would walk into court and just be like, I guess I'll take this on my own. Like, you need an expert. You need to know what the relevant laws are, what the relevant procedures are, and how you're going to get through that. So that's what I would say. Rabbis are more like that. I wouldn't say it's authoritarian. I would say it's based on expertise and specificity. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's authoritarian. Though in some ways, certainly, as anything can be abused and taken to an extreme, so can Orthodox Judaism. But that's not unique to them. It's true of every group.
Reminded of a blind man is condemned to be free. So I would suggest takes on more personal responsibility to be reformed.
It does take a lot of responsibility to be reformed because it's on us to make sure we're educated enough to make decisions. Yeah. Okay, we'll turn now to verse 3. Just to finish with this, and the young man, Yoash, was hidden with his maid, and he stayed with her for 6 years. Hidden, this is so interesting. Bebeit Adonai, right? Bebeit Adonai, it just says Beit Adonai. Mitcha Bey. So he was hidden there in the house of God, in the temple. Because Yehosheva was the wife of the high priest.
Okay.
We're being told.
Okay.
And it says, since no one dreamed that a small child was living there clandestinely, no searches were carried. No one could imagine that a small child would be living in the temple.
Right.
That's a bit also religiously a very, again, because it's the Holy of Holies is that it's a very dangerous place theologically to live, especially for a small child. How do we know he didn't wander into,
Yeah, go into the Holy of Holies.
I guess we just have to trust that God would have taken care of it if he had. So meanwhile, Atalia reigned over the land for those 6 years. In the 7th year, Yehoiada, God knows, or God, Yehoiada sent for the chiefs of the hundreds of the Karites, the name of a military unit that was possibly connected to the foreign battalions of the Israelite army. It could also have been the officers, and of the guards, and had them come to him in the house of God, temple. He made a pact with them, exacting an oath from them in the temple, and he showed them the king's son. Right? He wanted to make sure they were loyal to the house of David. And when he showed they were, he said, look, it's Joash, the last remaining descendant of King David. He instructed them, this is what you must do. 1/3 of those who are on duty for the week shall maintain guard over the royal palace. Another third shall be stationed at the sewer gate, and the other third shall be at the gate behind the guards. You shall keep guard over the house on every side. The temple, that is, this house. So we're going to have everyone watching the temple. The 2 divisions of yours who are off duty this week shall keep guard over the temple for the protection of the king. Right? And of course, who's the king? Joash is the king. You shall surround the king on every side with your arms at the ready, and whoever breaks through the ranks shall be killed. Stay close to the king in his comings and goings.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they state a ruler, either of Israel or Judah, was good in the eyes of the Lord. We don't have any comment about Athaliah.
Atalia, she's not dead yet.
Why?
We don't usually
Oh,
get
you don't
comments
know
until they die.
Okay.
Usually that sum up of it's this person lived such and such years, and they were buried. If they were good or decent, they're buried with their ancestors, or their bones were gathered to their ancestors. If they're not, they get eaten by dogs or something. Something terrible happens to them.
But since she's still
alive, so her story's not over yet. We don't get a usually if they're super duper ultra bad, there is a chance like not Moab, that's a kingdom. Ahav. Sometimes we get when they started, and he was king, and he started out good, but then he went very bad. Like sometimes they warn us, but in this case, they did warn us, right? They said, Atalia, she killed all these kids, and she sees the king. Like we know she's bad. Like you can interpret from that she's bad.
Yeah,
because you're not supposed to kill a bunch of kids and then seize a kingdom for yourself. Everybody should know. That's like one of those things. The Torah doesn't even bother to explain that that's bad because, come on, everybody knows you're not supposed to do that. Yeah,
We had female judges, but I don't remember another queen in
there was.
Israel.
Well, I mean, there were other powerful queens. Queens regnant. I think even there were. I think there were at least one other queen regnant. That would be a fun AI search. Like what? How many queens regnant were there?
Yeah, because she's a queen reigning, but
Right.
she didn't know it because she thought she was a queen because she didn't know about the survivor.
Deborah wasn't a queen.
She was a judge.
She's a judge, yeah.
See if that'll give us an answer. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I think there was another one. Okay. So the chiefs of hundreds did just as Jehoiada ordered. Each took his men, those who were on duty that week and those who were off duty that week, and they presented themselves to Jehoiada the priest. Okay, this is the only one, by the way. The only queen regnant was Atalia.
Yeah. Oh, really?
The other ones were queen mothers or who ruled as regents.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
also happened.
Yeah.
Or royal consorts like Isabel.
Yeah.
There were no other queen regnants. There were no queen regnants in northern Israel, although Jezebel was the closest. And for southern, it would be one. And then in the Hasmonean period, famously, there is Salome Alexander, who is a famous queen. And she, in the Hasmonean period, she rules as queen regnant. But that's not in the biblical period so much, since Maccabees didn't make it into our canon. We love the Maccabees, just not enough to put those books in the canon.
Mm.
Mostly because they're identifiably apocryphal. So we were like, it's not real. Isaiah, we've got a complete scroll of Isaiah from like 200 years before from like the Mycenaean Greek period, like really early. So like we can guess that Isaiah was a real guy in that way, because his book is only we have a full book of his from only like 200, 300 years after he lived. We don't have, it's just a whole, anyway, I don't need to go into biblical criticism now. So they're doing their thing. We're in verse 10, the priest gave the chiefs of hundreds King David's spears and quivers that were kept in the temple, right? And they had these things because they were honoring David by keeping them in the temple, but that means they had weapons in the temple. So they gave these guys who were off duty and didn't have weapons, because normally you're on duty, you go where? To the armory, and you get your weapons, and you equip yourself, and you go be on duty. And then when you're done, you don't take it home with you necessarily. You go and put it back in the armory, because again, the king has to have control of force of arms. In this case, these are weapons that are not under Atalia's control. So it's not just those who are on duty and have weapons, but now these other people have some weapons too. And also it shows what? This doesn't probably help you now that I'm doing this.
Conflict for power.
Close. Continuity.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that they are with the house of David. Right? Because what is this going to be? We are the kingdom of Judah. Our king is always supposed to be a descendant of David. Why is Atalia queen? She's not right. It's like why is she queen? They don't know, and that's so this will rally people to their side to see that they have the force of arms of King David. Verse 11. The guards, with their arms at the ready, stationed themselves from the south end of the house, from the temple, to the north end of the temple, at the altar and the temple, to guard the king on every side. Jehoiada then brought out the king's son and placed upon him the crown and the insignia. Insignia doesn't say what that means. The Steinsaltz says the testimony. What is it? Oh, is it Hanezer? Yeah. The Nazariteship, the crown, the consecration, the woman's hair. Hard to tell. They're really unsure. They anointed him and proclaimed him king. They clapped their hands and shouted, "Long live the king." When Atalia heard the shouting of the guards and all the people, she came out to the people in the temple. She looked about and saw the king standing by the pillar, as was the custom. The chiefs with their trumpets beside the king, and all the people of the land rejoicing and blowing trumpets. Atalia rent her garments and cried out, "Treason! Treason!" And it's funny because it says Vatikra Kasher, which in this case, Kesher means like connection. But here we're getting conspiracy, treason.
It's an interesting double meaning, since it is connection with King David's line.
Right, exactly. This idea, right? They're connected. I thought, it's like, oh, interesting, but no, right. She's saying, right, treason or conspiracy. Of course, she's like, I'm the queen. What are we doing? Then the priest Jehoiada gave the command to the army officers, the chiefs of hundreds, and said to them, "Take her out between the ranks, and if anyone follows her, put him to the sword." For the priest thought, let her not be put to death in the temple. They cleared a passageway for her, and she entered the royal palace through the horses' entrance. There she was put to death. Right? So they took her out back in the backyard in the palace, and they killed her there.
Okay.
Not noble, not, right? They did something similar to Mary, Queen of Scots.
Yeah.
When they set up her guillotine, they set it up in the stable yard as a show of disrespect, intentional show of disrespect. And that's what this is. Maybe they got the idea from this. I really don't know. That would be funny, I guess. They were pretty biblically literate, Elizabeth's counselors, so there's a chance they were able to. They made this connection. I don't know. It might have just been the fun thing for them to do. But in any event, they're trying to be very disrespectful to her. Here. And Yehoiada solemnized the covenant between God on the one hand and the king and the people on the other, as well as between the king and the people, that they should be God's people. Right? The high priest is doing a job here of trying to make Judah this righteous nation, to make sure that they're following the rules. This reminds me of the science fiction series Foundation by Isaac Asimov. I don't know if anybody read that. It was a major work of mid-20th century science fiction, and envisions a society that can see the future. Essentially a prophetic society, but they do it based on science, not based on, again, science fiction. It's not magic or religion, it's science, but they have they can essentially see what will happen before it happens because they have one really smart mathematician who creates a kind of math that can tell the future. Again, it's kind of magic. Anyway, the point being that here we get a kind of similar, we're trying to live up to a path that's been set out for us. We have to keep this going for the good of everyone. And the path here is to be the Davidic kingdom. And so the people and the king and God, the God and the people, this triangle is very important to the kingdom of Judah. In a way it has never been, by the way, for the kingdom of Israel. Yeah. It's very different. We're starting to see after 100 years about almost of separation, different cultures, perhaps, growing in Israel and Judah. Maybe a more religious culture in Judah, maybe a more secular culture in Israel. I'm not saying that's a for sure thing, but it's something to watch, I would say. Verse 18, thereupon all the people of the land went to the temple of Baal. They tore it down and smashed its altars and images to bits, right? Its statues. And they slew Matan, the priest of Baal, in front of the altars. Yehoiada the priest then placed guards over the temple. He took the chiefs of hundreds, the Karites, the guards, and all the people of the land, and they escorted the king from the temple into the royal palace by the gate of the guards. In other words, the front gate, right? She went in the horse's gate in the back. He goes in the front gate because he's the king. And he ascended the royal throne. All the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet. As for Atalia, she had been put to the sword in the royal palace.
So she doesn't sleep with her ancestor Sam. Yeah.
Well, and also there's no appraisal of how her.
But she also, right, she's just bad. You could tell she's bad also. She's almost not even, she doesn't get that, but she's almost not even real.
Yeah.
Her queenship is it's recognized in the sense that they say she ruled the land, but God never recognizes it, it seems, from the language of the.
You don't need to comment on whether she was a good or bad.
Right, because she almost wasn't one in the first. She was like a usurper from the beginning when she killed everyone but Joash, all the other kids. Okay, so they've got the Davidic dynasty back. Now we're in a really interesting, and for the first time since the death of Solomon, we're actually in a really interesting place religiously in chapter 12. We have the potential for two good, God-fearing kings. Potential. Yehu's descendants are now in charge because Yehu just passed away.
Right.
This chapter 11 was telling us what was happening while Yehu was doing the last years of his reign. But we have the potential for Yehu's line. Yehu, who was a zealot, in service of God's will, which also meant he got to go from general to king. Nice promotion. They have the potential to do what no good king of Israel has ever done, which is be a really good king. And we have a restoration of the Davidic monarchy with a high priest with a lot of political power who seems to be exerting it for good. Perhaps it feels like a moment in which good things could happen. I'm not saying they will, because they almost never do at this point. We're really on the, we're taking the roller coaster down to the bottom. We get little bips, and eventually we'll get one more little up, and then that'll be the end. And then it's just a straight drop. Once the Babylonians and the Assyrians are, once Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon, Assyria first, then Egypt, then Babylon in that order, come back to power. They re-establish their societies after the late Bronze Age collapse. It's all a story of downhill for the divided Jewish Israelite people, because they can't hope to stand up to any one of these nations at their full power, and certainly not divided. And that's indeed what happens. I hate to be a spoiler alert, but the northern kingdom is conquered by the Assyrians because Judah doesn't come help them, and neither does Egypt. Same story essentially repeats itself with the Babylonians coming to lay siege to Jerusalem about 170 years later. Hey, I write it differently if I could change the ending, but it's not in my power. We have to accept the things we cannot change. Okay.
I know the difference between those what we can.
Exactly. Okay, so we'll start chapter 12. Ben Sheva, 7 Shanim, 7 years old. Yoash ben Malcho. Yoash was 7 years old when he became king. Yoash, and now it's Yehoash because he's king now. He's not Yoash. Remember, they usually get the Yehoshaphat, or Yehu at the end or beginning. It usually gets changed from Yah, like Atal Yah to Atal Yahu. It usually gets changed from Yah or Yo to Yeho or Yahu when they become reigning, right? And that has to do with the idea that one can be of God, but you're not selected of God. It's a change in the grammar, essentially, of the name. And one isn't, it's their version. We see this today also in cultures that have, his name was Charles and Elizabeth were bad examples because they both picked their own names. But Elizabeth's dad was his name that he was called his whole life was David. No, sorry, that was their uncle. It was Bertie, Albert. Her dad was Albert, but he took the name George when he became George VI.
Okay.
To show continuity with his dad, who was, and also, by the way, his brother, who resigned, was known as David. Colloquially, he of course took the name Edward.
Yeah.
As so, this is like that, but obviously not quite because it's a version of their name. It's just grandiose for their reign. We will often in the translation, it's like Yehoash. So I'll try and remember to change it from Yoash to Yehoash. Anyway, Yehoash began his reign in the 7th year of Yehu. Right, Yehu's not dead. Remember, we were getting the story of how Yoash came to power while Yehu had already we'd read about Yehu, and he reigned in Jerusalem 40 years. Remember, he came to power as a 7-year-old. So 47 isn't that old, but he became king very young.
Nowadays, that's fairly old. 50s and 40s.
Yeah, they could have made it to 60. 47 still feels a little young, but he probably ate pretty rich. He was a king for so much of his life.
40 is another one of those numbers, yeah.
Yeah, but this is, and so is 7. And 40 is a good one. Anyway, right. Yehu had killed Jehoash's father when he ascended to power 7 years earlier. Remember, it was Jehoash's father who was killed by Yehu because he was a descendant of Ahav, and his wife was Atalia who took over.
Yeah, okay.
And she just wanted to kill all their kids, so that, and all the kids of all of his, so that nobody would be left. So inadvertently, she was kind of doing the job of Yehu. And now that, so this is happening. So will Yehu see Jehoash as a continuation, or because like Ahav did, he has the blood of the Davidic dynasty? If he's good, will Yehu let him be? Maybe. Right. His mother's name was Tzivia of Beersheba. All his days Jehoash did what was pleasing to God, as the priest Jehoiada instructed him. Remember what we said? This is good. There was a high priest with a lot of power and influence, and he was a good, not corrupt. He was a good, God-fearing priest. And so the same way we pray that how Alexander was trained to be king, and how Frederick the Great was trained to be king, and how Peter was trained. Some of these kings of Europe that were actually decent at their job were usually trained as what? What did what was the work? The philosopher king. It was Aristotle.
Aristotle.
And they used this. The best kings in European history were educated essentially Aristotelian, had Aristotelian educations. They were taught to be philosopher kings. They were taught that while they are the power and the sovereignty, they have a duty to their people, which is to be successful, right? Because of their nation. This is the early stirrings of nationalism, is this idea that the king represents the nation and therefore has some responsibility to the people. And has a responsibility to be wise and guide the nation. These are important, although authoritarian, obviously, these are important advancements in the idea of liberty and the idea of just governance.
Maimonides would have been Aristotelian as opposed to.
He was very Aristotelian, which is why he was excommunicated.
As opposed to Maimonides.
As opposed to Nachmanides, I would say almost nobody was Aristotelian until Maimonides. So it's really hard to say, to blame, admittedly, Nachmanides was after Maimonides. Right. But for the first 300 years after Maimonides, he was like a no-go guy. Nobody was allowed to reference him. Nobody was allowed to, he was kind of excommunicated. And then we figured out that actually he was probably right about pretty much everything. So the rabbis just kind of turned around on that. And they were like, actually, really smart guy, this Rambam. Let's look at what he had to say. And now we say from Moshe to Moshe, there was no one like Moshe. Yeah. Of course, the first Moshe being Moshe Rabbeinu, and the second Moshe being Moshe ben Maimonides. We have gone Maimonides as if that Greek name is good for him. But we also say Nachmanides, which again is also these are all Greek titles. These are all Greek names.
He was the one involved in the dispute, right?
He was the one in the disputation of Barcelona. Yes, Nachmanides was Moses ben Nachman was the disputant against Pablo Cristiani in the disputation of Barcelona in the late 1400s. Yeah, 1500s. Sorry.
Who? Am I remembering right? Who had been a Jew who had converted?
Yes, Pablo Cristiani was a Jew who converted to Catholicism. And it was because of that he was chosen by the cardinal of Aragon, which was Spain wasn't Spain yet. I'm sorry, it was earlier than it was the 1300. It was before Ferdinand and Isabella unified Spain. Castile and Aragon. And so King John was king of Aragon, and his Franciscan, I think, cardinal was like, or archbishop was like, what would be really great? We can convince the Jews to become Christians. And then when you do that, Jesus will come back and he will personally thank you for making this all possible. And then you won't go to hell. even though you love prostitutes and stuff. And King John was like, yo, that sounds tight. Let's do that. You want to have a debate and I get to go to heaven and Jesus comes back? Cool. So they were like, wait, and I don't have to make any changes to my life? Excellent. So he's like, great, let's have an argument. And of course Nachmanides is the thing, and Nachmanides wins. Mostly by, it's really hard because they set up these disputations across Europe in the 12th, 13th, and 14th centuries, really just to like browbeat the Jews into converting, which was never going to work. And then when the Jews don't convert, they go and kill a bunch of them to try and convince the Jews to convert, which also doesn't work, it turns out. So it really is just an excuse for the persecution of the Jews. And when Nachmanides is invited to participate, he declines because he says 2 years ago in Paris, there was a disputation like this as well. And a bunch of Jews were killed when they didn't convert, and the rabbi of Paris had to flee, had to leave the country. And he said, I don't really want the Jews here. We don't really want any trouble. You hate us. That's fine. We understand. Just let us be. But he did it in the end, and he did a great job.
Yeah.
But yeah, he can't be blamed for not being Aristotelian because he couldn't foresee that Maimonides was right. Nobody thought Maimonides was right. You know what I mean? Like, it's like saying Isaac Newton was right 6 minutes after he got hit with the apple or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's like, do we want to wait a minute and see? Like, do we want to run another? It's a little too soon to say anything, even though it turned out he was right. Right? Okay. Okay, let's see. Verse 3. Oh, we did that, right. So the priest instructed him, and he did what was good. God liked what he did, which was good, except for the one thing that that even in the South, people did. And they have very little reason to do it in the South because they don't have that political excuse I keep giving about Northern and not wanting to give power to this. This is Judah. They have Jerusalem. What excuse do they have for setting up except convenience? Right? If the only place to go to shul was in Kansas City, you'd probably go less. But there's a shul here in Topeka, so you can go more. Yeah. That's what they were saying. They were like, we live down in the desert. We live in the Judean desert. We're not marching all the way to Jerusalem. We'll set up an altar here. Baror, clear. Not so clear. God doesn't like it. Anyway, so except for this, the shrines, however, Habamot, were not removed. The people continued to sacrifice and offer at the shrine. So even when the temple stood, offering sacrifices to God on private altars was still popular, despite the fact that this practice was severely prohibited by Torah law, even though the Torah couldn't have been more clear. Don't set up private altars. Why?
Because Jerusalem.
2 reasons, right? The first reason, Deuteronomy said there was one place you'll sacrifice. Once it's set up, that's the temple in Jerusalem, and you've got it. What's the other reason?
I was going to say God lives in the temple.
Okay, it's a good reason, but not the one I'm looking for. Remember, I know how this sounds, and this doesn't always sound great, but one of the things the Jews are instructed to do is not to practice the practices of the other nations that live around them. Yeah. In fact, these days, you have some practices where you've got some things where non-Jews will start doing something Jews do, and then some Jews will stop doing it because they don't want to have it seen that they're imitating the practices of the non-Jews. Now, this is not meant to be insulting, though I can certainly understand why non-Jews would find it insulting. It's not meant to be insulting. The idea is that Jews are supposed to make it easy, as if anyone could forget us. We're supposed to make it easy for people to be able to identify us. Why?
Your behavior, actions.
In a good way.
Yes.
Because what, Chris?
Behavior and actions.
Oh.
To be a light unto the nations, we must be recognizable. And if our practices are just like theirs, then no one will tell us apart.
Sure.
Be holy. Separate.
And holiness does imply a separateness, yes.
But if the other nations copy our practices,
then then that's the thing. Sometimes we change.
But we're succeeding then.
Yes.
Yes.
maybe we were always meant to change our practices, and then they would change to model us again, and eventually we'd reach an equilibrium in which we were all acting the way we should. Maybe that way would even go beyond halakha to be a new form of human existence that would become regularized and standardized for human beings.
Maybe
a new way of
tribal-
being. Maybe that's what God wanted from us all along.
New way of being, yes.
And so we can do that, but we're going to have to keep changing, and they'll keep changing, and hopefully we'll all change for the better. Again, none of this is meant, the separateness has always been something other groups of people resented us for. Assuming that one could only want to keep oneself separate if one thought other people were bad or unclean or unholy or something evil, something negative,
yeah.
right, inferior in some way. But that's never the way it was intended. It's never the way it was intended.
Okay.
I can't change how non-Jews take it, except to try and explain it in the most neutral, straightforward way I can, that it's not meant as a insult. It's meant to guide us, the Jewish people, in how we fulfill our vocation, which is to help change humanity into the kind of being that can have both free will and that still chooses to follow the ways of God. We don't exist. Humans aren't like that right now. They have never been. We hope one day we will be. We believe it's the Jewish people's mission to help get humanity there.
To be a light to the nations.
And to finish the work of creation. And we believe anyone can join us in that. Not just by becoming Jewish, though they don't have to. They can do it without becoming Jewish. Nobody has to become Jewish to help with this process. Nobody has to. That's what I think is the most universal thing about Judaism. We are not asking anybody to convert, and you can still be perfectly good, and you can still go to heaven, and you can still all the best stuff, and nobody has to convert to Judaism. I can't imagine a more open, inclusive version of the afterlife than that, quite frankly. You don't have to change your religion, you just have to change how you act, and you can go to heaven. Sounds like a good deal. Other religions tell me I got to change my whole religion to go to heaven. I don't want to do that. I like my religion.
Yeah, it is a way to get past tribalism and have us have acceptance of everyone.
And in fact, it's specifically this instinct. Sorry, I took a bite.
You're loud.
It's specifically this instinct that gives rise to Christianity, which is essentially a universalized version of early Catholicism, and its ritual and all that is essentially a universalized, focused around the Trinity and you know all the, I won't pretend to understand, you know, to explain it, but refocused Judaism, universalized, is essentially what that is, right? Even before they decide Jesus is right, before that, it's certainly more like a Jewish offshoot. And then when they decide that if they just said he was a prophet or something, they probably could have stayed within the fold. But
Right.
but
Well-
you know, like the Karaites. But they were obviously, look, it worked out for them. I'm not saying I don't think Christianity would say they didn't do a good job. Like they feel they failed over the last couple thousand years. They certainly have grown to be the biggest or the second biggest religion in the world. You know, that's the thing, they wanted to grow, right? We were like, you don't have to change anything. You just have to change yourself, which is bigger, rather than change your religion. The Jews said, we don't care who you pray to so much. You can pray to Shiva or Jesus or Vishnu, or they don't pray to Buddha. I don't think the Buddhists pray to Buddha. I think they use his teachings to like connect to the divine, like a force. Like I'm no expert on, or whoever the Shintos pray to. I'm sure it's wonderful. It's like ancestor worship, I think, but I'm not exactly sure. And ancestor worship lets me circle back to how we got here. We weren't supposed to imitate the practices of the nations around us, and the nations around us did home altar ancestor worship. And they all had altars in their house. We even see this later in the Roman period and stuff, right? If you're a rich Greek or Roman, you have shrines to God, to their pantheons in their homes. We were not supposed to do that because that's what other people did. We were the only religion that had one place that you sacrifice, which is obviously important because we have one God. There's a deep meaning to the ritual. And we were trying not to do what other people did. And so they were still doing it, though. They still had these private altars in their backyards, in their homes, in their town squares. But it's not what God wants. Okay. Verse 5. Yehoash said to the priests, all the money, current money, brought into the temple as sacred donations, any money that someone may pay as the money equivalent of persons, that's like doing Pidyon Haben, and stuff like the redemption of the first son, right? You know, it's like, it's a ritual we have in which when you have your first son, you're supposed to literally pay the priests to redeem, because the Torah says the firstborn child of every animal and every person will be given over to God's service. Now, that's not really practical, especially if you're not a Levite or a Kohen. So what we do is, and these days it's especially not practical, so what we do is we essentially pay to redeem, like you can pay to get someone out of slavery, you pay to earn the freedom of your child. And it's just a ritual.
But it's interesting, a lot of times the younger child, David, for instance, is.
Oh, all the time in Jewish tradition. By the way, it was true of Abraham's son Isaac was the younger child, Isaac's son Jacob was the younger child, and Joseph was the second youngest at the time of his disappearance, and the second youngest in the story. So it's very common in our stories for the younger child, who shouldn't necessarily be preferenced, since our rules say that the oldest son gets a double inheritance. But in our tradition, it turns out it's the younger son, and that's intentional. It's intentional to show that God doesn't just favor the great and the assumed power, right? It's assumed that the oldest son should be the most whatever. And in most cases, yes, they get their inheritance, it's that kind of system. But it's not always. Righteousness, holiness doesn't always flow through power and through hierarchy.
Of course not.
And that's what Judaism is trying to teach us by showing us that even though it has rules that insist that the oldest should get more, in our tradition, often it's not the oldest who's the most blessed or the most successful or the most holy. In fact, often it is not. Because of something innate. Because deep down, we're all judged by our own souls. That's what what Judaism is trying to get across to you with that message. We're not based on it. You're not predestined before you're born to be anything. Even if you're born first, it's no guarantee.
The more firstborns are successful and leaders and cultural matters.
I think that's true for different reasons. I'm also a firstborn, and I think firstborns have to learn without the example of their older siblings, and that means it requires a lot more industrious pathfinding in life than younger siblings tend to face. That's my, as an oldest sibling, that's my interpretation.
I'm the oldest too, and I think the oldest bears the weight of his parents' expectations.
That too,
Yeah, and that I'm also
More subject.
and the pressure, so we work hard to live up to them.
Yeah.
Right, some people also flame out, but some of us, like in this room, become successful because of the pressure and are able to
More such as anxiety and depression too.
yeah, well, we've all been there.
Well, I know you know this, but depression, if we're not talking biological depression, is because the conscience, the superego, demands so much of you. How can you possibly live up to that? Yeah.
True enough. Okay, so we got all this money, we're taking it, we don't know what we're doing with it yet, but we're collecting all the money. and let the priests receive it, each from his benefactor. So each from Makaro. What would we say in a makar? Sounds like a mahar. Maybe the same root, but it may be the same. We all like a good mahar, a benefactor, someone who's going to give to the synagogue or the temple in this case. And in turn shall make repairs on the temple wherever damage may be found. The temple, because we've had a bunch of really bad kings, has fallen into some disrepair. So we need to focus on saving money so that we can use it specifically for repair of the temple.
We just spoke about the influence of a parent on a firstborn. You have a very nice setup here where this very young boy, actually at one age, has the high priest as his mentor.
Yeah. But yeah, true.
And so he follows what the high priest is saying and becomes what he's supposed to be.
In a way, but he's also kind of disengaged, as we'll see in this next verse. Because in verse 7, but in the 23rd year of King Jehoash, it was found that the priests had not made the repairs on the house. So they hadn't been effectively centralizing these collections, and they hadn't really done much in 23 years that Jehoash had been king. So King Jehoash summoned the priest Jehoiada and the other priests and said to them, "Why have you not kept the temple in repair? Now do not accept money from your benefactors anymore, but have it donated for the repair of the house." So usually, right, what he's saying is the way the temple raised money wasn't in any central way. You didn't give money to the temple. You had a relationship with a particular priest who usually, I guess, did your barbecuing, did your sacrifice. And when you did your sacrifice, he'd be like, "Oh, maybe you help out the temple a little bit." And he'd be like, "Oh, okay, sure, here's 20 shekels." Right? That's good. But they didn't really centralize that money and record keep it very well, and who knows where it went. And every 20 shekel here and 20 shekel there just kind of got fiddled away doing whatever. So the king says, "This won't do. I want you to repair the temple."
Bring up the New Testament again.
Sure, yeah.
Christ went into the temple and chastised for the money changing was going on, but that was a requirement. You had to do that though to buy your sacrifice.
Oh, so that was right. I often point out to people that the money changers were necessary because if you took not just because you needed that, but because if you brought an animal, one of your few animals from far away, the odds that it would get blemished injured in some way on the way there, and therefore not be able to be sacrificed for one of the three festivals was a pretty high. Was over half. So what was the smarter thing to do was to just bring your animal there and sell it, and then buy an animal from the temple where they had raised animals right next to the temple to be perfect.
Yeah.
Where you could guarantee that they would take it because they raised it. Right? You go to a restaurant, you don't bring your own damn steak. They provide it. Right? But you pay money for it. You usually pay more than you would pay to buy a chicken at the store, right? That's what Jesus was mad about. He was mad that the money changers charged more than the cost of the animals and therefore people were not getting a great deal.
Profiteering.
Right, that it was in some way making money off of sacrifice, which would be unholy. The trouble is, this was an easement. This was a lightening of the restrictions. This was done for the benefit of the people so that the people could sacrifice to God correctly. Now, this might not have upset Jesus because he was much more, as far as I understand, about what was in your heart than following the actual letter of the law. And while that's nice, these Jews were very interested in following the letter of the law, and trying to do sacrifice the way God wanted, so they wouldn't get talked about the way these people get talked about in the book of Kings. So they'd be talked about as having done the right thing. And so they were interested in making sure that the Jewish people had good, easy access to animals that would be eligible for sacrifice. They did charge more so that they could afford to raise animals in a city, in an expensive place, where they normally wouldn't raise animals except that they had a temple they needed to do this for. And so you see, so I can see his perspective, but I can also see how this was really trying to make sure that the Jewish people could do what God wanted them to do. And only is worth fighting if you're going to switch to prayer, which the Jewish people didn't know we were going to switch to prayer at the time. I often wonder if Jesus' story had happened 100 years later, and after the destruction of the temple, what his story would have looked like. Because I actually think he would have found a lot more comfortable home among the rabbis of 100 years later than the rabbis of his time.
I've always thought that.
I mean, again, there are some things, again, and I'm going based off any teaching that doesn't imply, not meaning to be disrespectful, I'm going off any teaching that doesn't imply he's related to God any more than the rest of us are. We're all sons of God.
Right.
But if as long as it's not anything that implies he's any more related to God than the rest of us, I think he probably could have gotten along a lot better with the rabbis of 100 years later than the rabbis of the time that he lived in. Mostly because those rabbis, didn't have any power. The rabbis are like the evil figures of part of the Christian story, but the rabbis have very little power at the time of Jesus' story. Far more, some of the elites are rabbis, but not all of the rabbis are elites. And those terms often in the Christian Bible, as I understand, it's kind of like, the rabbis, it's like, yeah, some of the rabbis are Sadducees, some of the rabbis are rich, powerful people and have been children of rabbis for 100 years, but some of them are brand new to it and are just as rabble-rousy as Jesus is. They're just willing to play within the system instead of playing outside the system. The rabbis have a pretty wide latitude for those playing within the system. Those who are trying to upend the system, they have a lot less patience for. And again, later when the system has been upended and sacrifice is gone, I think they would have been a lot more, if Jesus had to go also to a yeshiva, I mean, like, not like today's yeshiva, but like in Yavna, when after the destruction of the temple, Yochanan ben Zakkai starts his first rabbinic academy up in Yavna in northern Israel, which is actually where Jesus was from, northern Israel. So if he had grown up at that time, he probably would have gone to Yavna to study to be a rabbi, and probably would have ended up as a character of the Talmud. Jesus is not mentioned in the Talmud, by the way. There are a number of people who people think are Jesus that are mentioned in the Talmud. He actually might be mentioned once.
I think.
But it's not the time everybody thinks it is. Everybody thinks it's about the guy who's boiling in poop. Right. That's not Jesus. That's a different guy.
Really?
Yeah, he's actually mentioned in 2 places, and it's a different guy. You know how many guys were named Josh? It's Jews.
Yes.
Like you know how many guys had that name? Everybody. Like 30% of the people his age were named that. Like I'm just saying, it's a very common name even today. You know how many Jews are named Josh? We have 2 Jewish governors in the United States named Josh.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, 1 out of 25 U.S. governors is named Josh, and are Jews. So it's a very common name. Jesus wasn't the only guy named Josh in the history of the Jewish people. I say that because his full name would have been Yehoshua, not Yeshu or something. No one would have called him Yeshua or Yeshu. The Yeshu guy is the guy who is boiling in poop in the Talmud.
I see.
But nobody would have called him Yeshu in the time he was alive. He would have been called some version of Yehoshua, and Yeshu is not a derivative of Yehoshua. Yesh is, but Yeshu is not.
I see.
And Yesh is more modern, quite frankly, because they didn't use the word Yesh as much in Hebrew at the time, and it's more because now it's a very common word, meaning there is. Like Yesh Lecha, he has, right? Anyway, that's my. Now you've had me talk about Jesus for like 20 minutes. I love it. Chris, thank you. It's wonderful to be able to expound on things. Hopefully I'm not presenting in a disrespect. I don't mean to be disrespectful.
to carry that just a bit further, as I understand it, Jesus complained about the Pharisees, but in the sense of virtue signaling, praying in the public square. Whereas when he says things like, was man made for the Sabbath, or was the Sabbath made for man? He's being very rabbinic and very Pharisaic, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the weirdest thing about the whole thing about people talk about Pharisees. He was a Pharisee.
He was a
Yes,
Pharisee, yeah.
he was.
He was a rabbi, essentially. I mean, he was trying to be at the beginning. He was trying to be a rabbi.
Okay.
Eventually, it seems like he kind of went off to do his own. Like he didn't really, it was kind of understood in his own story that he was doing his own thing. But at first, he was trying to be a rabbi. Which, to be fair, there were lots of rabbis that were wandering the countryside. Even in these stories, there are random seers and stuff wandering the countryside with followers and stuff.
Right.
This is not new to Jewish tradition. It's been around forever. Like there's always been rabbis with followers, and it would continue for thousands of years. This guy, unfortunately, his followers decided that he was divine, and so that brought him outside the sphere of Jewish tradition. As I still can't get a straight answer on whether he ever. I haven't read the full Christian Bible. I still can't get a complete answer as to whether he actually said he was divine or of God, or whether that was something his followers said about him.
It was implied.
It was implied. Okay.
I don't think Jesus implied he was God. He always said, my Father. I think.
Right,
what
which
may
we
have-
can understand as God is also our Father. Right?
Exactly.
Which is what Nachmanides says in the Disputation of Barcelona. It's like we all call God our Father. On Yom Kippur we pray Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. Yeah, we're all the children of God. Anyway,
I read the New Testament with that question very much in my mind, and I don't think Jesus ever suggested he was God. What may be implied in there is he may have implied he was messianic, but not divine.
right, and of course, right for us, the Messiah is not a God, but a man. So he could have been, if he had completed the goals, he could have been Messiah.
I think what got into the picture for him was when the Romans took over Christianity, and for them, anybody high up was a god. Caesar.
Is that I don't know how they made the decision. I don't know how they made the decision about.
Well,
his divinity.
it wasn't in his time, and it was in. There was a whole.
Well, he didn't have much time. He lived for less than 40 years, as I understand.
There was a whole century of what Jesus was, and after the Romans became really involved, they said, "We know he is. He's God, and we worship him." But they worshipped anybody in authority with it.
Well, Caesars were also like pharaohs.
Exactly.
Caesars were like demigods.
Yeah.
We got the Council of Nicaea.
Right.
We have Arius who's saying the Son is not the same as God. God is higher. And Athanasius.
Mormons believe that, I think.
Pardon?
I think Mormons have. I think they're each their own person.
I see. Okay.
I think
Yeah.
God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit are all separate people in Mormonism. I'm not. Don't quote me on that. I'm not an expert in Mormonism, but I think that's their thing, which I think makes them different from other Christians. And then I think for other Christians, they're all supposed to be one, and that's how we. By the way, that's how Jews get around. Christians are not around the idolatry question about Christianity. We can easily accept Christianity as not idolatry, so long as Christians say that the three of those are really what represent God. It's only that might mean. Hopefully, it doesn't mean because I like the Mormons. That might mean that they are idolaters if they worship three gods. But they would say, I think that they don't worship three gods; they worship one God, and that has three parts.
By the way,
There were a
most
lot of
Republicans.
Christians.
What?
By the way, most of them are Republicans.
Most Orthodox Jews too.
There were a bunch of Christians that did not accept the Trinity, and they became very quickly
Marginalized.
enamored of Islam because they didn't believe in the Trinity either, and
Right,
a lot of them
yeah.
converted quickly.
Yes, when Islam's conquest started,
Yeah,
yes, many Christians converted to Islam. So did Jews, but that was, and many of them were forced to. I can't.
My understanding of history was that the controversy was called the Arian heresy. And that Constantine, the emperor of Rome, kind of said to the church, hey, you guys, I want one emperor, get it together, sit together in council and resolve this issue so that there isn't conflict.
And also, there were like many churches, and I think it would be helpful for any government to be able to have
Yeah, they
one
want to
state
pull it together.
religion instead of, right, a church here and a church there and a church in the east and a church in the south. And yeah, I could understand how that would be difficult for them to control. I'm actually kind of shocked. It's really shocking. It's still shocking to me that somehow the Romans went from murdering Christians in front of crowds to becoming them. It's just really surprising still. It's one of those big coups of history.
Well, Constantine needed to pull the empire together.
Sure, but
he was
yeah.
a big wheel behind that.
I'm just do whatever you like, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just an interesting turn of events. You know, lots of people have killed Jews for sport across history,
Yeah.
but they never turn around 100 years later and convert to Judaism.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to me. Anyway, let's finish this chapter, chapter 9. So the priests, remember, they're getting money in, and they agreed that they would neither accept money from the people nor make repairs on the house. So they wouldn't take the money for the repairs. The temple would take the money into its treasury, and the temple would centrally organize it. And the priest Jehoiada took a chest and bored a hole in its lid. He placed it at the right side of the altar as one entered the temple, and the priestly guards at the threshold deposited there all the money that was brought into the house of God. Whenever they saw that there was much money in the chest, the royal scribe and the high priest would come up and put the money accumulated in the temple into bags, and they would count it. They would then they would deliver the money that was weighed out to the overseers of the work who were in charge of the temple. These in turn used to pay the carpenters and the laborers who worked on the temple, and the masons and the stonecutters. They also paid for wood and for quarried stone with which to make the repairs on the house of God, and for every other expenditure that had to be made in repairing the temple. However, no silver bowls and no snuffers, basins, or trumpets, no vessels of gold or silver were made at the house of God from the money brought into the temple. This was given only to the overseers of the work for the repair of the temple. No check was kept on those to whom the money was delivered to pay the workers, for they dealt honestly. Money brought as a reparation offering or as a purgation offering was not deposited in the house of God. It went to the priests. Remember, money brought as a reparation offering or purgation offering, what happens to that money? We just talked about it. That money is used to purchase an animal for which a sacrifice would be made. So that money didn't get put in the chest because they had to use it to buy an animal. They didn't have those tables yet. They would soon. Nothing for Jesus to be angry about yet. They don't have it. They have to go out and buy in the market animals when people bring money. Soon they will build this into the temple so that people won't have to rely on those stores of what's in the market and what's available. They'll be able to do it themselves.
Incidentally, I want to thank you. You cleared up something that had always bothered me. I had always thought to myself, why didn't Jesus understand that they had to buy their animals?
Well, he understood. I think he did understand that.
You helped me understand
okay,
that.
yeah.
The profiteering mode was what you said. He didn't like.
I think it was making profit on it, but it was also, look, we have strict rules. For instance, now there's a chest of money sitting in the temple. It sits there on Shabbat too. Are we supposed to deal with money on Shabbat? No.
But
We're supposed to put this. So what I'm saying is it might not be breaking anything yet, but we're bending things for comfort. He might have been upset. It might have been Jesus being machmir, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
On the idea of
keeping money
separate from holiness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And while there's some credence to that,
yes,
the trouble becomes we institute the idea. We have the idea in Judaism that the Torah isn't far from us; it's near to us, so that we can make changes, small changes, interpretations as needed, so that we don't make things too easy or too hard. Jesus obviously thought we had made things too easy in our making things comfortable to the point where we had committed a sin.
Mhm.
That's his interpretation. I haven't read, but our rabbis understood that what we had done fell within the bounds of acceptableness in order to make sacrifice in the legal way correct and able for people to do it easy enough in a way that fit within the bounds as they saw it.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
But could we say the same thing when in our announcements on Friday night, we say the tzedakah box is out in the foyer?
Yes, I would say that, by the way, we say that differently than when Debbie was here. Because it used to be, please consider giving, when I first got here, I think it was like, please consider giving a donation to our monthly choice, Mazon, it is this month, the tzedakah box is in the foyer.
Yeah.
I changed it because I don't want to encourage anyone on Shabbat to give a donation. The tzedakah box is in the foyer, and this is who we're giving it to.
Okay.
You see what we cut?
Yeah, don't donate.
You can give money tomorrow too. You can
Yeah.
give money on Sunday.
Yeah.
You can give money on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah.
Or Friday before Shabbat.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
I made that change to satisfy theology, to
Mhm.
satisfy what we believe.
Thank you.
It's not something that was important previously to other rabbis. That's fine. It is important to me.
Mhm.
Nobody called me Jesus though. Has v'shalom. Not because he's a bad guy, just because has a lot of other connotations for us.
Yeah, I don't think Josh is a nickname for Samuel.
It's not, thank God, right? I got my own, right? Shmuel and Avi. I joked that if I should have been blessed with children, I should have named my son Natan. And my wife was like, "Your father's name is Michael." I said, "Yeah, I know that." But Natan was the successor to Shmuel in the book of Samuel. Natan is the successor to Shmuel, so that might have been a fun
Right, yeah.
for anyone named Samuel to name their son Nathan would be a fun biblical joke that is fun for everyone, I guess. Maybe just me. Okay. So they did that. The priest had that money that was for those offerings. At that time, King Hazael of Aram came up and attacked Gath. Right? It's this border area of northern Israel. And captured it. And Hazael proceeded to march on Jerusalem. So not only did he capture the northern part of the north, but he was planning to go all the way through Israel and seize up the whole thing. Thereupon King Joash of Judah took all the objects that had been consecrated by his predecessors, King Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, and Ahaziah of Judah, and by himself, and all the gold that was there in the treasuries of the temple of God and in the royal palace, and he sent them to King Hazael of Aram, who then turned back from his march on Jerusalem.
He
He
paid
paid tribute.
What do we think of that?
We think badly of it.
Okay.
He gave away all these consecrated things, these
Yes.
important tools of the temple, just because they were made of gold and silver, and all these things we had designed as national treasures. He's not the first. He's not the last. He's not the first. Also, someone has already stripped. Remember all the gold that Solomon had made the whole room and the shields and gold. Those are already gone. The king of Israel, of Judah has already given those away in tribute. Now the tools and things we've given away in tribute to the Arameans of all people. Feel how low and lack of power this is. This isn't Egypt or Assyria or Babylon or Persia or Rome. This is the Arameans. They're nobody. They were our vassals 20 years ago. And now we have to give away our most prized possessions just to have them turn back from killing us. It's a low point.
We should have gone to war. We should have.
No, we'd have lost probably. We should have been in a better position in the first place.
Okay.
They usually only give tribute if they're pretty sure they're going to lose.
Yeah.
He didn't even trust that God could deliver him a victory. He was like, "Oh, we're going to be."
Doesn't seem to be any.
Remember, this is a kingdom in a lot of. Yehu has killed both of the kings. Everyone is weak. There's a lot of weakness right now, and our rivals can see the weakness. The other events of Joash's reign and all his actions are recorded in the annals of the kings of Judah. His courtiers formed a conspiracy against Joash and assassinated him at Beit Milo, that leads down to Selah. The courtiers who assassinated him were Yehozavar. Yeah, I don't know why it says. Yeah, son of Shomer. I don't know why it says Shema.
Shema.
I know, but here it says Ben Shomer. I mean, I'm looking at the word.
Yeah.
And it says, yeah. And even in the thing, it says son of Shomer. I know why it says Shema, because that's not his name.
What?
Unless it is later.
Verse 22 it is.
Oh, okay. Well, no, but I'm saying it says that, but it's not. Because if look at the Hebrew.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Oh, okay. Ben Shemat, Ben
Shemat.
Shomer. Okay. Okay. Son of Shemat and okay, it's just out of order. I see.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So son of Shemat and Yehozavad and Shomer. He died and was buried with his ancestors in the city of David, and his son Amaziah, which will be Amatziahu, succeeded him as king.
So he wasn't a perfect king, but he was good enough to get buried with his ancestors.
He was good. He wasn't perfect, but he was a good king.
Yeah.
He worked on the temple. He did good things generally. He didn't stop the private worship. But again, that would have made him popular, keeping the private worship, because people liked that. So doing all these other things was popular, fixing the temple, but also letting people keep their private. So he was just popular with the people.
Yeah.
That's why it has to let us know. Because if we had this other book, The Annals of the Kings of Judah, it might have just said he was really popular and everyone liked him for 40 years.
Yeah, but he ruled for 40 years. He didn't die a natural death. He got bumped off.
Yes, he did not die a natural death. He did get murdered by his by his courtiers.
Well, and the societies were starting to show real
a lot of strain. Yeah, right. These kingdoms. This was what we started to see in the Northern Kingdom right away. This people murdering the king and then picking a king, then murdering the king and then picking a king, and now that's what we're seeing in the Southern Kingdom too.
And are we to take it that this was just for political reasons, succession, or was it the preceding paragraph was?
No, I think it was political reasons.
Okay.
I think that was a political thing.
Yeah.